Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here, everybody. Today, I initially, just in for full transparency, I wasn't given much of an option this morning. I was basically informed I would be doing this today, but I'm always happy to help on subjects that are important to Lucia. Um, Yeah, I don't know what was covered in the past on ABT. We'll get into that a little bit here in a minute, but Lucia gave a nice introduction about this framework. Um, uh, there was a hopeful aspect of what she indicated. I would say that not all scientists will use this method that we'll kind of describe more of an applied examples of how to use it, but it is certainly a powerful framework. And for those that do, I've used it for probably 15 years now. And so it's been a pretty important part of my career development. And more importantly, um, the success, I guess, in communicating ideas. And we'll get into that again a little bit, but little bit of background on me. So as Lucia said, I'm a scientist. I've worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's a federal wildlife agency. I've been a wildlife professional for now 35 years, going on a little bit more. I'm still working. I spent 30 years with the federal government and then have been in private practice on my own. And then now I'm working for another company, part of a contract I had several years ago, and they decided to pick me up as an employee. So I've been enjoying it for a long time. But what I will say though is, just a little bit of background about what that means, and I want to talk about kind of why does any framework, any communication framework work? Not all of them do work, and we need to obviously be not just attentive to what our audience or who our audience is, but what are their needs? What are they really, why are they listening to me? Why are you listening to me today? I've had Lucia's helped me a bit about that to try to get me sort of dialed into what the world that you're facing professionally, academically. Hopefully we'll be able to feed into some of those needs. And I will say I'm pretty informal. If there's something that I have said or you have more questions about, you can interrupt me. I'm fine with that. I'm really comfortable with that style. But if you want to hold off questions to the end, I'm fine with that as well. So my position, I'll talk mostly about my position, kind of the demand that was placed on me and what I kind of signed up for professionally as a wildlife professional. I specifically have been involved with endangered species for the bulk of my career, but not just studying and researching them. So as a scientist, there's kind of two aspects to science. There's a sort of the research dimension. I know you know this, but I want to share with you where I fit in and where ABT came in. I've done formal research, field research. I continue to do that on occasion. I've got a certain percent of my time that's allocated to that. But the bulk, probably 80% of my job, still to this day, is taking the results of science and applying them. And so I interface with the public, with sort of what we call the human dimension of wildlife. When I was young, I signed up I pursued this line of study, this career, because I thought, well, I'm going to be less involved with people. That might be a good thing. So I'm going to be more connected to wildlife. And that wasn't the case. Actually, what it turned out to be is I had to learn how to become very effective in working with people, partnering with other organizations, so that my goals would be I guess implemented and achieved. And so I had to learn to listen and listen really well. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that as well, build that into this. So as a scientist, I was involved with policy development with the federal government, I have spent a considerable amount of time fighting lawsuits or supporting lawsuits, I should say, against the federal government, supporting attorneys when the environmental antagonists, you might say, are against us, against the federal government. There was lawsuits, so I spent time there developing regulations. But again, all of that information was being informed by science. So I had to learn how to develop a pretty good eye to, and didn't always get it right, but I had to learn how to develop a pretty good eye to uh, decide what was important about the science and what was not worth fighting over. And so that's a really important part of where the ABT kind of fits in. Um, and so let me just say that's enrolls Randy Olson into my life around 2010 or so. Randy Olson is the developer of the ABT framework. I met him probably close to 15 years ago now. And he sort of transformed the way I think. I had had some success at communicating and some failures. And I was really looking to sort of hone in my communication skills. I wasn't worried about my scientific techniques. I wasn't worried about how to write a technical paper or get a publication. I was really more concerned about how do I take the importance of that information and convey it into a public setting. Basically, how do I tell that story to make it impactful and honestly persuasive? So this is about persuasive storytelling. If nothing else, it is certainly that. And what also drew me to Randy Olson, the author of this technique, is that he was a scientist. You probably may remember this, may not know this for those who haven't been exposed to this before. He was he graduated from Harvard, PhD in marine scientist, marine ecology, was a full faculty, tenured faculty member at one of our universities on the East Coast. And I remember him saying that he was sitting in a conference, and this is what resonated with me when I first listened to him and met him. He was sitting in a conference listening to yet another series of presentations on marine, the problems with our marine environment and some of the challenges associated with the quality of the marine environment. And he was bored to death. He was literally falling asleep about it in a very technical presentation. And it just dawned on him that this just wasn't working. From a scientists are just generally very poor communicators on the importance of their research. At least they were at that time. So here's a technique or a framework that initially was created by a scientist for scientists. And this framework is easily exportable. It can be applied to any academic or scientific undertaking. Anytime you want to communicate, even just a simple idea amongst your colleagues. If you've got a novel idea, and we all do at times, the effectiveness of that communication, not necessarily the quality of the idea, but we will all be judged by how well we communicate the idea. And unfortunately, a lot of good ideas get lost because we just didn't get that communication nailed. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So let's just talk about the problem a little bit on communication. It's really kind of twofold, not just boring communications or sitting in a conference. That's certainly a good use of this framework, but it's really getting into how do we become a more effective communicator. In short, let's just refer to it as what are the benefits of my idea? Okay, what have I been doing? Or what is the idea I have, and why do you think it's a benefit? And translated for me is, just simplifying it. How is my idea that I might be representing? In my case, I was representing decisions by a president of the United States or an agency that I worked with, a high-level appointed official, saying, "Here's an idea, here's a new policy." And me as a decision maker, and that was one of the things I did towards the end of my career. I spent many years in it as a decision maker, as well as implementing new decisions, decisions that people made above me and decisions I made. And so I was challenged, I guess, with how can I not sell an idea, but present the benefits of an idea such that I would elicit a favorable response, basically persuasive discussions, and engage or to promote my audience to engage. I was not there to inform, although we have done a lot of that. When I say we, federal government, at least in this country, we spend a lot of time just here it is, go do it. Here it is, informing and go make it happen. And I was, for better or worse, I was put in a position where I needed to, in order to cause a policy to be effective, I needed to enlist the support of the public. So as a public servant, which is the term we use in the United States for federal employees, so I took that to heart. I'm a public servant, so how can I serve my audience best? Well, I needed to get myself kind of skilled up, improve my skills, I guess, in communicating and generating effective messages. And that's where I came on this and, but, therefore framework. It just turned out to be a super, super effective framework, at least in my case. Let me just talk now about the benefits. I'm going to transition to that a little bit. I mentioned that I want to kind of dig into some of the little bit more of the details of why this is such an effective framework. Now, I don't use it every day of my life, of my professional life, but when I'm challenged to even do something like this, it sort of defaults after many years of using it. I sort of default into what do you all what do you need? What's really in your interest? Why are you here today? And rather than just try to give you an idea, hey, use this, it's going to be effective. I want to kind of walk you through my story of using it, and sort of help. Maybe you'll be able to relate to a few of these items. My first experience at a professional conference was right after I got out of graduate school. I was presenting to, there must have been about 300 or 400 people. It was my first sort of right out of graduate school, and I looked across this sea of wildlife professionals, and I didn't know how to tackle that situation. Now, I presented. They have competitions a lot of times. I didn't win the competition. I came in second, but the feedback I received on that very first presentation, now I was all of about 24, 25 years old, was that I failed to connect with the why to my audience. I spent a lot of time talking about how I did my research, the methods I used, but so the novel statistical techniques, I thought that was really important. I thought that was kind of cool, and spent a lot of time sort of probably focusing on what I did as opposed to why this is important. Kind of taking my eyes off myself. And this is one of the benefits of the technique or the framework. It gets our eyes off of ourselves and onto the subject. And it gets us particularly on the needs of the audience. You've heard me say that once or twice. I'll probably say it even a couple more times before we're done today. I mentioned to you that another place that I needed it for was communicating decisions to the public. This is a really important part of my work. The federal government, even more so today, if you are following the news for the United States, we are in a state of typically very polarized communities and culture as a country. It hasn't been, it's been more intense lately. But when I was working as a federal employee, it was there. It was always there. There was always sort of a resistance to the federal government's ideas. So I was walking in to a lot of these conversations with a predisposition to not being received. So because I was working as a federal employee, I was not to be trusted. So I was challenged with trying to overcome that. And I had to get over that fairly quickly in order for my communications to be effective. So that's a situational awareness for the audience that I think, again, the ABT can be informed by that. Okay, so that framework, when I was developing a short presentation, I was thinking about what is going to hold my audience back and what do I need to say or address explicitly, transparently. I don't want to just kind of secretly, kind of like, sort of backdoor. I wanted just to open that up. And one of the techniques I used is sort of a modification to the ABT. So I would introduce the subject. So basically, for those, again, who may not be familiar with the technique, I'll just touch on it. You introduce I don't want to say key players, but all the actors in the story. So I'm going to introduce all my actors. There's Kevin, Shelley, and there's this new policy, and there's these kind of these big needs out there in the environment. But we have this problem, and that's where the but comes in. So I then would introduce the conflict, basically. And I don't think, conflict is I just mentioned we're already in a culture of conflict, but I chose not to shy away from embracing conflict. So I would literally open it up to my audience, and I would say, I understand that the federal government may have made decisions in the past, we have, that has undermined the trust of the people. And I'm here to hopefully address that, but I need your help to address this conflict. So it didn't just fall on me. So again, that's sort of my twist on the conflict. I would say, all right, we've got conflict. We have a challenge. And I say we, not the federal government, not the people, but together, we as a community, we have a challenge. And we need each other to wrangle this, to wrestle this conflict down. Now, some research that I might present at a conference or in a conversation with, let's say, a farmer, a landowner who's a producer. He's growing maybe thousands of acres of 3 or 4 different kinds of agricultural products. He's also raising cows. How am I going to relate something that's very technical, that's peer-reviewed journal type information that we might have understood about, let's say, a butterfly? How am I going to make that important to a landowner and a producer? I had to bridge that gap. And so I can talk more about that, but I'm just trying to present it. If you have more questions about that, we can come back to that, but I want to just lay out, let's not be afraid. And I would encourage us all not to be afraid of that conflict. Let's embrace it. Let's sort of wrangle it and sort of, deconstruct the nature of the problem. So that's, again,
Excellent.
communicating.
And and I think, Kevin, that all the framework that you're setting up for us help us to understand that as educators, well, we have the opportunity to access so much research. Now with the internet, we have free access to much research that has been done in our field, the education, but we cannot just keep it in our brain or just at the background of our teaching, but how to engage our own students, our parents, our community to buy in into what we're doing for our students. And I would love to hear from my fellow teachers in Ukraine about how the situation is there in regards a parent-school relationship or students buying into a investing in their own education. But I think if they have any questions about how the science and making it available to people that are not scientists or educators will come up. If that's okay with you, I will pass on those questions. But I thank you so much for bringing us from your perspective what the ABT is and that framework that we're going to start using it right now as educators. And I thank you so much, my love, for coming and visiting us today. Thank you so much.
All righty, bye.
Thank you so much. Well, definitely it's a different world of what he lives on with all the laws and uh, lawsuits and all that. Thank God we're not in that boat. But I want us to engage now in our reality as educators. So this is just a warning for all of you as attending this class and this course. The U.S. Department of State can take pictures or video of these recordings, and not to do anything bad with it. It's just to promote exchange and other educators to buy into contributing with other countries and just diplomacy efforts. So if that's okay with you, let's get started. As my husband said, the and but therefore goal has been for a long time since this crazy scientist, Randy Olson, left Harvard University and all the research he had done to come and try to connect scientists with the general public. So he left his career and he went to Hollywood to learn how the people there work in creating a very compelling story that can bring people and people interest into science. So he has written several interesting books. One is Don't Be Such a Scientist. I love that name. And the other one is Houston, We Have a Narrative. So all of us, believe it or not, we're selling something, right? In our classes, we want to grab the students' attention for them to be interested in what we're going to be teaching, or simply when somebody asks you, oh, what book did you read? Or maybe, I don't know, what movie you just watch. So we're all telling a narrative. And this is a system that is going to help us to be more effective, as my husband Kevin said, in our communication. So let's get started. In this world that it's media driven, that all people are constantly scrolling and looking for the new thing, well, narrative is king, because we have to be able to communicate in a way that really gets our audience engaged and wanting to connect with us. So this is what it is. So it's a three-part storytelling framework. The first one is tell me the facts, tell me the situation. The second one is introduce a contradiction or a problem that is disrupting the initial situation you just mentioned. And the last part is the therefore. And I love when people here in the United States, every time you find a therefore, find why is there for. So show the consequence or the way forward or leading to a resolution. How are we going to solve this problem? And those are the three main tools that we will be implementing today. So it's nothing but an effective storytelling technique. And we're going to be using this approach. So I want to show you these three examples. So as I said, when you're telling the focal point of a movie or a book, so let's just think about these examples. For example, in The Wizard of Oz, well, Dorothy lived on a farm. That's the first one. And her life was uneventful. So that's the end. But a tornado took her to the land of Oz. So that's the problem. She is in a different setting. But therefore, she had to find her way back home. So, as you mentioned, this is a summary of a story that can be a book, or you can teach that to your students in order for them to be effective. And I've seen many students that struggle when you said, well, summarize the book or summarize the story, and they don't know how to do it. So this technique is super effective to help your students tell me the main situation, something